The widow's hands were raw and bleeding, but she never once paused in her work, and her daughter beside her learned that survival in Nevada territory meant embracing pain as readily as breath. Grace Novak had been widowed for 8 months when the spring of 1878 arrived in Yarrington, bringing with it the kind of heat that made even the hardiest settlers question their choices. She stood outside her modest homestead just beyond the town limits, teaching her daughter Lily the art of washing laundry for the town's residents. At 18, Lily should have been courted and married by now, but Grace had different priorities. Her daughter needed to understand the value of honest work before anything else, especially after watching her father drink himself into an early grave the previous summer. "You must scrub harder along the collar," Grace instructed, her own hands submerged in the scalding water of the wooden tub. "Men who work cattle get the worst dirt there. If you return their shirts still stained, they will not pay us, and we will not eat." Lily nodded, her dark hair falling forward as she bent over her own washing station. The girl had her mother's green eyes and determined jaw, but at 22, Grace could see the weariness already settling into her daughter's shoulders. It broke something inside her every single day, but what choice did they have? Her husband Thomas had left them nothing but debts and a reputation for unreliability. The sun climbed higher as they worked through the pile of clothing. Grace had taken in washing from 10 different households this week, supplementing their income with occasional baking when she could afford the flour. The physical labor was crushing, but she refused to consider the alternatives some widows chose. She would teach Lily that dignity came from the sweat of honest work, not from dependence on charity or worse paths. "My hands hurt, Mama," Lily said quietly, holding up fingers that were red and wrinkled from the harsh soap and hot water. "I know, sweetheart. Mine do too. But this is how we survive. This is how we keep our home and our self-respect." Grace reached over and squeezed her daughter's shoulder gently. "Your father never understood that working hard was no shame. He thought himself above physical labor, and it destroyed him. I will not let that lesson be lost on you." They worked in companionable silence for another hour before Grace noticed the rider approaching from the direction of town. She straightened, shading her eyes against the glare. A man on a dappled gray horse moved at an easy pace, and as he drew closer, she recognized him as one of the ranch hands from the Copper Valley spread, one of the larger cattle operations in the area. Warren Vance had worked at Copper Valley for 3 years, ever since arriving in Yarrington from Wyoming Territory. At 26, he had the weathered look of someone who had spent most of his life outdoors, with sun-creased eyes and the lean build of a man who earned every meal through physical effort. He had brought his laundry to Grace twice before, always polite, always paying exactly what he owed without complaint or unnecessary conversation. He dismounted before reaching their washing stations, leading his horse the final yards out of courtesy to avoid kicking up dust over their clean laundry hanging on the lines. "Morning, Mrs. Novak. Miss Lily." He touched the brim of his hat, his voice carrying the slight drawl of someone who had grown up further south before drifting north. "Good morning, Mr. Vance," Grace replied, wiping her wet hands on her apron. "I have your shirts ready. They are inside, wrapped in paper." "I appreciate that, madam, but I actually came out here with a different purpose today." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "I have been watching you and your daughter working these past months. Every time I come to town, I see you both out here, dawn to dusk, doing work that would break most men's backs." Grace stiffened, immediately defensive. "We manage just fine, Mr. Vance. We do not need pity or charity." "No, madam, I can see that clearly. That is not what I am offering." He glanced at Lily, who had stopped working to listen, then back at Grace. "What I am trying to say, poorly it seems, is that I would like to help. Not out of pity, but because that kind of burden should not fall on two people alone. I would like to ask if I might share in that beautiful burden you carry." The words hung in the air between them. Grace stared at him, trying to understand his meaning. Was he proposing? Surely not so directly, without any prior courtship or indication of interest. "I do not understand your intention, Mr. Vance," she said carefully. He removed his hat, holding it in both hands. "I would like to court you, Mrs. Novak, if you would allow it. I know it has not been a full year since your husband passed, and I know that makes my timing poor. But I have watched you teaching your daughter the value of hard work and dignity, and I have never seen anything more admirable. I come from similar circumstances. My own mother raised me and my sisters after my father died in a mining accident. I know what it means to fight for survival through honest labor." Grace felt her heart beating faster. She had not expected this, had not allowed herself to think about such possibilities. Her marriage to Thomas had been difficult, marked by his drinking and inability to hold steady work. The idea of opening herself to that kind of disappointment again terrified her. "Mama!" Lily's soft voice drew her attention. Her daughter was watching her with cautious hope in her eyes. "I need time to think about this, Mr. Vance," Grace said finally. "This is not a decision I can make standing in my yard with washing to finish." "Of course, madam. I understand completely." He replaced his hat. "Might I come by again tomorrow evening? Perhaps I could help you carry water from the creek and we could talk then." Despite herself, Grace felt a small smile tugging at her lips. He was not proposing to sweep her away or rescue her like some romantic hero. He was offering to help carry water, one of the most tedious daily tasks they faced. There was something genuine in that. "Tomorrow evening would be acceptable, Mr. Vance." He nodded, paid for his laundry, and rode back toward town. Grace watched him go, aware that Lily was watching her with barely contained excitement. "Do not start planning anything," Grace warned. "One conversation does not make a courtship, and a courtship does not make a marriage." "But Mama, he seems kind, and he did not talk down to us or act like we needed saving. He talked about sharing the work." Grace returned to her washing, but her mind was far from the task at hand. Lily was right. Warren Vance had not approached them with condescension or false gallantry. He had spoken plainly about work and burden and sharing. That honesty appealed to her more than any flowery words could have. That evening, after they had hung the last of the clean laundry and prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread, Grace found herself thinking about Warren's words. A beautiful burden. That was exactly what it was. She loved her daughter fiercely, loved their little homestead and the independence they had carved out. But it was exhausting beyond measure, and the constant worry about money wore on her spirit. "Tell me about Papa," Lily said suddenly as they sat on the porch steps, watching the sun set over the distant mountains. Grace was quiet for a long moment. She had tried to shield Lily from the worst of Thomas's problems, but the girl was not blind. "Your father was a good man who carried demons he could not defeat," Grace said finally. "He loved you very much, Lily. Never doubt that. But he could not love himself enough to stay sober, and that weakness killed him in the end. I do not speak of this to dishonor his memory, but so you understand why I work so hard to teach you self-reliance. I never want you to depend entirely on anyone else for your survival or happiness." "Is that why you are hesitant about Mr. Vance?" "Partly. But also because I do not know if I can trust my own judgment anymore. I chose your father, and that choice brought so much pain alongside the joy of having you. How can I trust myself to choose better this time?" Lily took her mother's work-roughened hand. "Maybe you cannot know for certain." but you can see what a man does, not just what he says. Mr. Vance has always been respectful and honest with us. That has to mean something." Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. When had Lily become so wise? She supposed hardship aged everyone faster than years alone could. The next day passed in the usual rhythm of work. They finished the washing, delivered clean laundry to several households in town, and collected payment. Grace used some of the money to buy flour and sugar, carefully counting every coin. The summer would bring more work as harvest season approached, and farmers needed extra hands, meaning more laundry and more mouths to feed. If they could save enough, she hoped to buy fabric to make Lily a new dress. The girls' clothes were all patched and faded. As evening approached, Grace found herself nervous in a way she had not experienced in years. She changed into her better dress, the dark blue calico that was only 2 years old and still had most of its color. Lily helped her pin up her blonde hair more neatly than the simple bun she wore for work. "You look pretty, Mama," Lily said with a smile. "I look tired and old," Grace replied, studying her reflection in their small mirror. She was only 34, but hard living had left its marks. "You look strong and beautiful," Lily corrected. "That is better than merely pretty." Warren arrived exactly when he said he would, riding up to their homestead as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. He had cleaned up from his day's work, wearing a shirt that Grace herself had washed the week before. "Good evening, Mrs. Novak, Miss Lily." He dismounted and tied his horse to the post near their well. "Good evening, Mr. Vance. I have 2 buckets ready if you truly meant your offer about the water." "I absolutely did." He picked up the wooden buckets with ease and walked beside her toward the creek that ran about 300 yards from their house. Lily stayed behind at the house, making herself scarce with obvious intention. Grace might have been embarrassed by the transparency of it, but she appreciated her daughter's understanding that this conversation needed privacy. They walked in silence for a few moments, Grace very aware of Warren's presence beside her. He was tall, probably 6 feet, and moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. She barely reached his shoulder and felt small beside him in a way that was not entirely unpleasant. "Thank you for agreeing to let me visit," Warren said as they reached the creek bank. He knelt and began filling the first bucket. "I know my offer yesterday was somewhat sudden." "It was completely sudden," Grace agreed. "Mr. Vance, I must be honest with you. I do not know that I am ready for courtship or anything it might lead to. My marriage was not a happy one, though I loved my husband. I do not know if I can risk that kind of pain again." He finished filling the second bucket before responding, then stood to face her directly. The evening light caught his eyes, which were a warm brown that reminded her of good earth. "I understand that fear, Mrs. Novak. My mother told me about her own hesitation after my father died. She never did remarry, though she had offers. She said she could not risk bringing someone into our lives who might hurt us or turn out to be less than he seemed." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I cannot promise I am perfect or that I would never disappoint you, but I can promise honesty and hard work. Those are the only things I know how to give." Grace studied him, looking for any sign of dishonesty or hidden agenda. She found none, only a kind of steady sincerity that was rare in her experience. "Why me, Mr. Vance? There are younger women in town, women without children, women who might bring property or money to a marriage. Because when I watch you teaching your daughter to take pride in honest work, I see someone who shares my values. Because you have built something from nothing in the face of hardship. Because you do not complain or seek the easy path." He picked up the full buckets. "And if I am being completely honest, because I think you are beautiful, especially when you are working so hard that you forget to frown." Despite herself, Grace laughed. "I frown, constantly, like you are trying to intimidate the laundry into cleaning itself." His own smile was warm and genuine. But sometimes, when you think no one is watching, you smile at your daughter and your whole face changes. They walked back toward the house, Warren carrying the heavy buckets as if they weighed nothing. Grace found herself relaxing slightly. His compliments were not flowery or false. He appreciated things about her that she valued in herself, things that had nothing to do with conventional beauty or feminine accomplishments. "I will consider your offer of courtship, Mr. Vance, but I must move slowly. Lily has already lost her father. I will not bring someone into her life who might leave or cause harm. That is all I ask, madam. The chance to prove myself through action, not just words." When they reached the house, Lily had prepared coffee, and the three of them sat on the porch as evening deepened into night. Warren told them about his work at Copper Valley Ranch, about the challenges of managing cattle in the Nevada Territory heat, about the other ranch hands and the ranch owner's family. He asked Lily about her own interests, listening attentively when she spoke shyly about her love of reading and her hope to someday have enough books to call it a proper collection. "The ranch owner's wife has quite a library," Warren said thoughtfully. "She is always looking for someone to help organize it. She might be willing to pay for assistance, or at least allow you to borrow books in exchange for the work." Lily's eyes lit up with such hope that Grace's heart ached. When had she last been able to give her daughter something she wanted rather than just what they needed? "That would be wonderful," Lily breathed. Warren nodded. "I will speak to Mrs. Holloway about it. No promises, but I think she would appreciate the help." He stayed for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between them. Grace found herself laughing more than she had in months, and when Warren finally rose to leave, she felt disappointed rather than relieved. "Thank you for the coffee and the company," he said, settling his hat back on his head. "Might I call again in a few days?" "You may," Grace agreed. "And Mr. Vance, thank you for speaking to Mrs. Holloway about Lily. Regardless of what happens between us, that kindness to my daughter means a great deal. She is a bright young woman. She deserves opportunities." He mounted his horse with practiced ease. "Good night, Mrs. Novak, Miss Lily." They watched him ride away into the darkness, and then Lily turned to her mother with barely contained excitement. "Oh, Mama, he is perfect. He is kind," Grace corrected gently. "That is not the same as perfect. Do not let yourself become too attached too quickly, sweetheart. I need time to know him better." But even as she cautioned her daughter, Grace felt hope stirring in her own heart, tentative and fragile as new spring growth. Over the next 3 weeks, Warren became a regular visitor to their homestead. True to his word, he arranged for Lily to work 2 afternoons a week at the Holloway Ranch, organizing the library. Mrs. Holloway, a cultured woman from Boston who had followed her husband west, was delighted to find someone who treated her books with proper reverence. She paid Lily a small wage and allowed her to borrow any books she wished. Meanwhile, Warren's courtship of Grace progressed in the most unusual fashion she had ever experienced. He did not bring flowers or candy. Instead, he arrived with tools to repair their sagging porch steps. He showed up early on laundry days and spent hours helping them haul water and wring out heavy sheets. He brought fresh meat from cattle slaughtered at the ranch, supplementing their meager supplies without making it feel like charity. "Your mother would be proud of how you turned out," Grace told him one evening as they sat together after a long day of work. Lily was inside, absorbed in a novel she had borrowed from Mrs. Holloway's collection. Warren looked surprised. "What makes you say that?" "You understand something most men do not. You see the value in the daily work that keeps people alive and fed. You do not consider it beneath you. My mother did not have the luxury of raising sons who thought themselves too good for hard work, he said quietly. After my father died, we would have starved if we had not all contributed. I was 7 years old when I learned to do laundry and cook and clean. My sisters worked alongside me in the fields. Mama took in sewing and baking, anything to earn money. By the time I was old enough to work for wages, I understood that all honest work has dignity. Grace reached over and took his hand, a gesture that surprised them both. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact. His hand was calloused and warm, and holding it felt right in a way that made her chest tighten with emotion. "I think I am falling in love with you, Warren Vance," she said softly. "That terrifies me." He turned to look at her, his expression serious. "It terrifies me too. I have watched too many friends marry quickly and regret slowly. But Grace, I need you to know that I am here for the long years, not just the easy days. I see all of you, the strength and the fear and the exhaustion, and I love what I see." Her name on his lips sent warmth through her. He had been calling her Mrs. Novak for weeks, the formality a barrier they had both respected. Hearing her given name in his voice felt like crossing a threshold. "Warren," she said, testing his name in return. "I want to trust this. I want to believe it can be different this time." "It will be different because we are different people than you and your first husband were, but it will not be easy, Grace. I am gone for days sometimes when we move cattle. I do not make much money. I cannot offer you an easy life. I do not want an easy life. I want an honest one, with someone who shares my values and treats my daughter with kindness. You have already proven you can offer that." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her work-roughened knuckles with a gentleness that made tears spring to her eyes. "Will you marry me, Grace Novak?" "Not immediately, if you need more time. But eventually. Will you let me share your beautiful burden and build a life alongside you?" She thought about Thomas, about the pain and disappointment of her first marriage. Then she thought about the past 3 weeks, about Warren's steady presence and genuine care. She thought about Lily's happiness and the way Warren listened to her daughter's thoughts as if they mattered. She thought about her own heart, which felt lighter than it had in years. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms and she let herself lean against him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest, the steady beat of his heart. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt like she might not have to carry everything alone. They told Lily that evening, and the girl's joy was so pure and unrestrained that both adults found themselves laughing through tears. Lily embraced Warren without hesitation, and Grace saw his eyes shine with emotion as he hugged her daughter back. "I will do my best to be a good father to you, Lily," he said quietly. "I know I cannot replace the one you lost, and I would not try, but I promise to care for you and your mother with everything I have." "You already have been good to us," Lily replied, wiping at her eyes. "You are the answer to prayers I was afraid to pray." They decided to wait another month before marrying, wanting to do things properly despite their certainty. Grace needed time to feel fully comfortable with her decision, and Warren wanted to save enough money to add a room to the homestead so that Lily could have privacy once they were married. During that month, Grace discovered layers of Warren she had not yet seen. He had a quiet sense of humor that emerged once he felt comfortable, often making dry observations that left her giggling like a schoolgirl. He was patient with animals and children, stopping to help a young boy catch his escaped dog one afternoon in town, spending nearly an hour tracking the animal down. He had strong opinions about politics and the treatment of the Paiute people who lived in the region, anger in his voice when he spoke about broken treaties and stolen land. My mother taught me that dignity belongs to all people, regardless of what they look like or where they come from, he explained one evening. She said that anyone who has to diminish others to feel strong is truly weak inside. Grace loved him more with each revelation. He was thoughtful and principled, qualities she had not fully appreciated in her youth when she married Thomas. She had been 18 then, attracted to her first husband's charm and easy smile, not yet understanding that character mattered more than charisma. The wedding took place on a warm Saturday morning in late July at the small church in Yerington. Warren's friends from Copper Valley Ranch attended, along with several of the families Grace did laundry for. Mrs. Holloway came with her husband, bringing a beautiful quilt as a wedding gift. The ceremony was simple, but Grace felt joy radiating through her as she spoke her vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Warren kissed her with a sweetness that made her believe in second chances and new beginnings. They celebrated with a meal at the town's hotel, Warren having saved enough to pay for dinner for their small group of guests. Lily sat between Grace and Warren, glowing with happiness. Several people commented on what a lovely family they made, and Grace realized with surprise that they were right. They were a family now, bound not just by vows but by genuine love and mutual respect. That night, after the guests had left and Lily had gone to sleep in her room, Grace and Warren lay together in the bed they would now share. She was nervous, her only experience being with Thomas, and those encounters had not been particularly pleasant. Warren seemed to sense her anxiety. He held her gently, his hand stroking her hair. "We do not have to do anything tonight if you are not ready," he murmured. "I can wait as long as you need." But Grace found that she did not want to wait. She wanted to claim this new beginning fully, to let go of the past and embrace the future. She kissed him, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as he responded with warmth and patience. What followed was a revelation. Warren touched her as if she were precious, taking his time, responding to her reactions. There was passion but also tenderness, a give and take that Thomas had never bothered with. When they finally came together, Grace felt cherished in a way she had never experienced before. Afterward, she lay in his arms, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" Warren asked with immediate concern. "No," she whispered. "The opposite. I did not know it could be like that. I did not know I could feel so valued." He held her close, and she felt his own tears against her hair. "You deserve to feel valued every day, Grace. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." They fell asleep intertwined, and Grace woke the next morning feeling more rested than she had in years, despite having slept less. Warren was already awake, watching her with a soft expression. "Good morning, wife," he said, the title carrying such warmth that she smiled. "Good morning, husband." They rose and dressed, and Warren helped her prepare breakfast. Lily emerged from her room, looking shy but happy, and the three of them ate together as a family for the first time. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following weeks. Warren continued his work at Copper Valley Ranch, but came home every evening unless the cattle were being moved to different pastures. On those occasions, he was sometimes gone for 3 or 4 days, but he always returned as quickly as possible, and his absence made their reunions all the sweeter. Grace and Lily continued taking in laundry, though Warren wanted to discuss eventually finding a way for them to work less. "I do not want you to stop completely," he explained one evening. "I know you take pride in your work, and I would never ask you to give that up. But perhaps we could be more selective, take fewer clients so you are not working from dawn to dusk." "I would like that," Grace admitted. "My hands hurt all the time now, and Lily should have time for things besides work. She is still young enough to have some joy in her life." They compromised, reducing their laundry clients to 5 steady households and supplementing with Grace's baking, which was becoming increasingly popular in town. Warren's steady income from the ranch, combined with their reduced but still present earnings, allowed them a modest but comfortable life. In September, Grace realized her monthly courses had not come. At first, she attributed it to stress or perhaps the change in her life circumstances. But when October passed without them as well, and she began feeling queasy in the mornings, she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant at 34, something she had not anticipated. Lily had been born when Grace was barely 16, and Thomas had been unable or unwilling to give her more children after that. She had assumed her childbearing years were essentially over. The realization filled her with complicated emotions. Joy at this new life, this symbol of her marriage to Warren, fear about the risks of childbirth at her age, worry about how they would manage financially. Excitement at giving Lily a sibling, something her daughter had always wanted. She told Warren that evening, watching his face carefully for his reaction. His expression moved through surprise to wonder to pure joy in the space of heartbeats. "Truly, we are going to have a child. Yes, I believe the baby will come in late April or early May." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with delight, then immediately set her down gently as if afraid he might hurt her. "I am going to be a father. Grace, I am going to be a father." "You are already a father to Lily," she reminded him gently. "I know, and that means everything to me. But this is different, a child we created together." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach with something like reverence. "How are you feeling? Are you well? Do you need anything?" His concern made her smile. "I am tired and nauseous, but otherwise well." "Warren, I must tell you I am somewhat frightened. I am not young anymore for childbearing." His expression sobered. "I will not lie and say there is no risk, but we will find you the best care available and we will face whatever comes together. You are strong, Grace. You have survived so much already." When they told Lily, the girl burst into tears of happiness. "A baby! Oh, Mama, I am so happy for you both." The months that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Warren added another room to their homestead, this one intended as a nursery. Grace sewed tiny clothes when she was not too tired, often with Lily's help. Her daughter had become quite skilled with a needle and thread. The pregnancy was harder than Grace remembered her first one being, but perhaps that was simply the reality of being nearly 20 years older. She tired easily and her body ached in new ways. But Warren was endlessly patient, taking over more of the household tasks and never complaining when she needed to rest. In March, Grace's old friend Sarah Morrison came to visit, having heard about the pregnancy. Sarah was a midwife who had delivered dozens of babies in the region. "You are healthy and strong," Sarah assured her after an examination. "The baby feels positioned well. I do not foresee any particular complications, though of course, childbirth always carries risk. Will you attend the birth?" Grace asked. "Of course. I would be honored." Sarah squeezed her hand. "I am happy for you, Grace. You deserve this joy after the struggles you have faced." Warren continued to be attentive and loving throughout the pregnancy. He seemed fascinated by the changes in Grace's body, placing his hand on her belly to feel the baby kick, talking to the child through her skin. His devotion never wavered, and Grace found herself falling more deeply in love with him every day. On a warm afternoon in late April, Grace's labor began. The pain started gradually, allowing Warren time to fetch Sarah and prepare the house. Lily was sent to stay with Mrs. Holloway, as they had previously arranged. Grace did not want her daughter to witness the difficult parts of childbirth. The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening, long enough that Grace began to fear complications. Sarah remained calm and reassuring, but Grace could see concern beginning to show in the midwife's eyes. Warren stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. His presence steadied her, giving her strength when her own was flagging. Finally, as the sun set and lanterns were lit throughout the house, the baby came with one final tremendous effort. Grace heard the infant's cry and burst into tears of relief and joy. "A boy," Sarah announced, placing the squalling baby on Grace's chest. "A healthy baby boy." Grace looked down at her son through tears, taking in his red face and shock of dark hair. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. She looked up at Warren, who was also crying openly, his eyes fixed on his son with wonder. "We have a son," Grace whispered. "You did beautifully," Warren said, kissing her forehead, then gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Thank you, Grace. Thank you for this gift." They named him William Thomas Vance, honoring Warren's father and Grace's first husband. Grace had worried that Warren might resent honoring Thomas, but he had insisted. "He was Lily's father and he gave you your daughter. That deserves recognition, regardless of his struggles." William was a demanding infant, keeping them awake at all hours with his hunger and need for comfort. But Grace found she did not mind the exhaustion the way she had with Lily. This time, she had a partner who shared the burden. Warren would wake in the night to change the baby's cloths, walking him around the room when he fussed, singing soft songs in his rumbling voice. Lily was a devoted older sister, always eager to help care for William. At 19 now, she was blossoming into a beautiful young woman, and Grace noticed several young men in town beginning to take interest. But Lily seemed in no hurry to court anyone, content to focus on her work at the Holloway Library and helping with her baby brother. The summer passed in a blur of baby care and regular work. Grace had stopped taking in laundry entirely during the late stages of her pregnancy, and Warren did not want her to resume immediately. They managed on his income and Grace's baking, which Mrs. Holloway had begun purchasing regularly for ranch social events. In August, when William was 4 months old, Warren came home from work with unusual excitement in his eyes. "The Holloways are selling Copper Valley Ranch," he announced. "They have decided to return to Boston. Mrs. Holloway's father is ill and they want to be with family." "I am sorry to hear about her father," Grace said. "But what does this mean for you? Will you lose your position?" "Actually, Mr. Holloway called all the senior hands together this afternoon. He wants to sell portions of the ranch to those of us who have worked there longest, at fair prices and with payment terms we can manage. He said he would rather see the ranch divided among people who have cared for the land than sold to some Eastern corporation." Grace's heart began beating faster. "Warren, are you saying you could own land?" "Not a huge amount, but yes. 500 acres with water rights to the creek that runs through it, enough to run a small cattle operation or even try farming. The payment terms are generous, stretched over 10 years. She sat down, feeling overwhelmed. "Could we truly afford this? I have run the numbers every way I can think of. It would be tight, especially at first. We would have to be very careful with money. But yes, I believe we could do it. The question is whether you want to." "It would mean hard work, probably harder than what we do now. Ranching is not easy." Grace looked around their small homestead, then down at William sleeping in his cradle. She thought about Lily and the opportunities landownership might provide for her future. She thought about Warren's steady work ethic and the life they had built together. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, we should do this. We are not afraid of hard work. We never have been." Warren's smile was brilliant. "I was hoping you would say that. I told Mr. Holloway I needed to discuss it with my wife. but that I was very interested. Over the next month, they finalized the purchase. The land Warren bought was beautiful, rolling grassland with the creek providing reliable water. There was even a small cabin on the property, larger than their current homestead and in better repair. Moving to the new property felt like beginning a new chapter. They brought their few possessions and immediately set to work making improvements. Warren began building a small herd, purchasing cattle with careful attention to their quality. Grace planted a kitchen garden and resumed her baking on a larger scale, selling to multiple establishments in Yarrington. Lily helped with everything, proving herself invaluable. She had a natural way with animals and seemed to enjoy the ranch work. Mrs. Holloway, before leaving for Boston, had made Lily a gift of 50 books from her library, the beginning of the collection Lily had always dreamed of owning. The first winter on their own land was difficult. Money was tight, and the work was relentless. Grace sometimes lay awake at night, nursing William and worrying about whether they had made a mistake. But Warren never wavered in his determination, and gradually they began to see progress. By the following spring, their small herd had grown. Several calves were born, healthy and strong. Grace's baking business was thriving, and Lily had begun taking in sewing work to contribute to the family finances. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset, Warren pulled Grace close. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Grace considered the question seriously. She was tired, her hands still rough from work, her body showing the effects of pregnancy and hard living. But as she looked at her family, at the land they were building something on, she realized that yes, she was happy in a deep and fundamental way. "I am," she said with certainty. "I never imagined this life, Warren. After Thomas died, I thought the best I could hope for was survival, but you have given me so much more than that. You have given me partnership and love and a future worth working toward." "You have given me the same," he replied, kissing her temple. "I spent years drifting, working for other people's dreams. Now I have my own dream built with you." As if summoned by their words, Lily emerged from the cabin with William on her hip. The baby was 8 months old now, beginning to make sounds that resembled words. He reached for his mother with a happy gurgle. Grace took her son, holding him close and breathing in his sweet baby smell. Lily sat down beside her, and Warren put his arm around both his wife and stepdaughter. For a moment, they simply existed together, a family bound by choice and love rather than just blood. Time continued its forward march. William grew from baby to toddler, taking his first steps on his first birthday. Lily began courting a young man named Jacob Peters, the son of a farmer whose land adjoined theirs. He was a quiet, hard-working man who treated Lily with respect and kindness. Grace approved, seeing in their courtship the kind of steady foundation she had found with Warren. The ranch continued to grow, slowly but steadily. They added more cattle, improved their fencing, built a proper barn. It was never easy, but the work felt meaningful in a way Grace's laundry work never had. They were building something lasting, something that could be passed down to their children. In the fall of 1881, Lily and Jacob were married in the same church where Grace and Warren had wed. The young couple settled on Jacob's family farm, but visited frequently. Grace missed having her daughter in the house daily, but seeing Lily so happy eased the ache. That same winter, Grace discovered she was pregnant again. The news was both joyful and concerning, given that she was now 37. Warren immediately insisted on bringing in Sarah Morrison for regular check-ins throughout the pregnancy. This pregnancy was harder than William's had been. Grace spent much of it exhausted and uncomfortable. But in early June of 1882, she delivered a healthy baby girl. They named her Rose Sarah Vance, the middle name honoring the midwife who had attended both births. Rose was a quieter baby than William had been, content to observe the world with solemn dark eyes. William, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and constantly wanted to help care for her. Lily gave birth to her own first child that same summer, a daughter named Emma. Grace found herself grandmother and mother to a newborn simultaneously, a situation that would have been overwhelming without Warren's steady support. The years that followed were full, busy years. Warren and Grace worked their ranch, raised their children, and built a reputation for integrity and quality livestock. William grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved animals and seemed destined to follow in his father's footsteps as a rancher. Rose was more bookish, often found reading stories to her dolls or helping Grace with cooking and baking. Lily and Jacob had 2 more children, giving Grace 3 grandchildren by 1886. The extended family gathered frequently for meals and celebrations, filling Grace's life with joy she had never imagined possible during those dark days after Thomas's death. One evening in the spring of 1887, as Grace and Warren sat on their porch watching William teach Rose to rope a fence post, Grace reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "You ever think about that day you first asked to share my burden?" she asked Warren. He smiled, taking her hand. "I think about it often. It was one of the best decisions I ever made, though I was terrified you would reject me. I almost did. I was so afraid of being hurt again, of making another mistake. Are you glad you took the risk?" Grace looked at her husband, at the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. She thought about everything they had built together, the children they had raised, the love that had grown deeper with each passing year. "I am more than glad. Marrying you, building this life with you, it is the best thing I ever did. You kept your promise, Warren. You shared my burden, and you helped me transform it into something beautiful." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing it as he had on the day he proposed. "We transformed it together. That is the secret, I think. Not one person carrying everything, but 2 people sharing the load." Their quiet moment was interrupted by William running up to the porch, Rose trailing behind him. "Papa, I did it. I roped the post 3 times in a row." The boy was nearly 8 now, tall for his age and full of energy. "That is excellent, son. Keep practicing and soon you will be ready to help with the real cattle." Warren stood and ruffled his son's hair affectionately. "Can I practice too?" Rose asked. She was nearly 6, small and delicate, but with a stubborn determination that reminded Grace of herself. "Of course you can," Warren said. "Anyone who wants to learn ranch work is welcome to try, regardless of whether they are a boy or girl." Grace smiled at her husband's response. He never tried to limit Rose based on her gender, always encouraging both children to pursue their interests and develop their skills. As the sun set and they called the children inside for supper, Grace felt profound gratitude for the life she had been given. It had not been easy, and there had been many moments of doubt and struggle. But standing in her kitchen, preparing food with ingredients from her own garden and meat from her own cattle, surrounded by her family, she knew that every difficulty had been worth it. That night, after the children were asleep, Grace and Warren lay together in their bed as they had so many nights before. Age and hard work had marked them both, but the love between them had only strengthened. "I love you, Grace Vance," Warren murmured in the darkness. "I love you too, Warren. Thank you for seeing me all those years ago. Thank you for asking to share my burden." "It was never a burden, my love. It was always a blessing." They fell asleep in each other's arms, and Grace's last thought before sleep claimed her was simple but profound. "This is happiness. This is home." The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Summer heat gave way to autumn color, then winter cold, then spring renewal. Each year brought new challenges and new joys. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. William grew into a responsible teenager who took his role on the ranch seriously. Rose developed a love for baking that rivaled her mother's skill, and began helping Grace supply baked goods to Yerington's growing population. In 1892, when William was 13 and Rose was 11, Grace discovered she was pregnant once more. The news shocked them all, as she was 43 years old and had not expected to bear any more children. "Mama, are you certain?" Lily asked when Grace shared the news. Lily herself was now pregnant with her fourth child and had assumed she and her mother would be experiencing their pregnancies separately this time. Sarah confirmed it. "I can hardly believe it myself." Grace placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "I am frightened, Lily. The older you are, the more risks there are. But you are strong and healthy, Mama, and you have Papa and all of us to help you through it." Warren was simultaneously thrilled and terrified. He hovered over Grace constantly, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. She finally had to sit him down and explain that she could not spend 9 months being treated like fragile glass. "I will be careful," she promised. "But I also need to remain strong, and that means staying active. We will find a balance, Warren. We always do." The pregnancy progressed well, though Grace tired more easily than she had with her previous children. As autumn turned to winter, Sarah Morrison visited regularly, monitoring both Grace and the baby carefully. In February of 1893, during a gentle snowfall that blanketed their ranch in white, Grace went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted nearly 24 hours. There were moments when Sarah looked worried, when Warren paced the floor with fear in his eyes, when Grace herself wondered if she would survive. But finally, as dawn broke on the second day, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Grace collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure. "Another boy," Sarah announced, placing the baby in Grace's arms. Small but healthy with good, strong lungs. Grace looked down at her youngest son, at his tiny face and miniature fingers. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she realized that this would almost certainly be her last child. There was both sadness and relief in that knowledge. They named him Thomas Warren Vance, honoring both Grace's first husband and Warren himself. Young William and Rose were delighted with their baby brother, taking turns holding him and helping care for him. Lily gave birth to her own son 2 weeks later, and once again Grace found herself with a newborn and a grandchild arriving nearly simultaneously. The coincidence became a family joke, with Lily claiming that her children wanted to grow up with their aunt and uncles. As Thomas grew, it became clear that he had inherited Grace's determination and Warren's steady temperament. He was a thoughtful child, slower to walk and talk than William had been, but deliberate and careful in everything he did. The years passed, each one adding to the rich tapestry of their life. In 1895, William began courting the daughter of another rancher, a spirited girl named Margaret who could ride and rope as well as any man. Warren and Grace both approved, seeing in Margaret someone who would be a true partner to their son. Rose showed no interest in courting, instead focusing on expanding the baking business. At 14, she had regular orders from 3 establishments in Yerington and was developing a reputation for beautiful wedding cakes. Thomas, at 3 years old, followed his father everywhere, shadowing Warren's movements and trying to help with ranch work in his own small way. One summer evening in 1896, the entire extended family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. It was Warren and Grace's 18th wedding anniversary, and their children had organized a surprise party. Grace looked around at the assembled crowd, hardly able to believe how much their family had grown. Lily and Jacob with their 4 children, the oldest now 15. William with Margaret, not yet married but clearly heading in that direction. Rose directing the younger children in setting up tables. Thomas holding tightly to Warren's hand, neighbors and friends who had become like family over the years. Speech. Someone called out and others took up the cry. Warren looked at Grace and she nodded, standing beside him as he addressed their guests. 18 years ago, I made the best decision of my life when I asked Grace Novak to let me share her burden, Warren began, his voice carrying across the yard. I watched her teaching her daughter honest work, and I saw someone who embodied every value I held dear. She could have said no. She had every reason to protect herself and Lily from potential disappointment or pain. But she took a chance on me, and together we built this life. He gestured to the ranch around them, to the buildings and fences and cattle in the distance. None of this would exist without Grace's courage and hard work. She is the strongest person I have ever known, and I am grateful every day that she chose me as her partner. Grace felt tears welling up as Warren turned to her. You transformed my life, my love. You gave me purpose and family and a home. Everything good in my life flows from that day when you agreed to let me carry water from the creek with you. You transformed my life too, Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. I thought I knew what I deserved, what I could hope for. You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that love could be partnership, that marriage could be built on respect and shared values, not just romantic feelings that fade. You gave me stability and devotion and a love that has only grown stronger with time. They kissed to applause and cheers from their guests, and then the celebration began in earnest. There was food and music and dancing. Grace danced with Warren, with her sons, with her son-in-law Jacob, with several of their ranch hands and neighbors. As night fell and lanterns were lit, Grace found a quiet moment to stand at the edge of the gathering and simply observe. She was 51 years old now, marked by time and work but still strong. Her life had not been easy, but it had been rich with meaning. She thought about the young widow she had been, scrubbing laundry in the yard with raw hands, trying to teach her daughter that honest work had dignity. She thought about Warren riding up on his gray horse, offering to share her beautiful burden. She thought about all the years since, the struggles and triumphs, the children born and raised, the love that had sustained them through everything. Warren came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. What are you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. How grateful I am. How impossible this all would have seemed to me back when I was washing laundry and counting every penny. You would have made it regardless, Warren said. You are strong enough to stand alone. I am just grateful you chose not to. We are stronger together, Grace said, leaning into his embrace. That is what you taught me. That accepting help does not mean weakness. That sharing burdens makes them lighter. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their family and friends celebrate. Thomas eventually found them and demanded to be picked up by his father. Warren complied, settling the 3-year-old on his hip while keeping his other arm around Grace. This is my favorite place, Thomas announced with the certainty of young childhood. Mine too, Grace agreed, kissing her youngest son's cheek. Mine too. The years continued their march forward. William married Margaret in 1897, and they settled on a portion of the ranch that Warren deeded to them as a wedding gift. Within a year, they had welcomed their first child, another grandson for Grace to dote on. Rose continued to resist courtship, focusing instead on her business ventures. By the time she was 18, she had saved enough money to open her own bakery in Yarrington, a bold move for a young, unmarried woman. Grace worried about her daughter's unconventional path, but also felt fierce pride in Rose's independence and business acumen. Thomas grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved reading as much as ranch work. He had Grace's green eyes and Warren's steady temperament, and showed signs of being a natural mediator who could settle disputes between his siblings and cousins. Lily's children were growing up as well, the oldest preparing to go to college in California, an opportunity that would have been unimaginable to Grace at that age. The family's gradual prosperity had opened doors for the younger generation that Grace was determined they should walk through. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Grace and Warren celebrated their 22nd anniversary quietly, just the two of them riding out to a favorite spot on their land. They dismounted and sat together on a hillside overlooking the ranch, watching their cattle graze in the distance. 22 years, Grace mused, more than half my life now. The best half, Warren said with a smile. Absolutely the best half. She leaned against him, comfortable and content. Do you remember what you said to me that first day about my burden being beautiful? I do. I meant it then and I mean it now. I did not understand at the time. I thought you were trying to romanticize the struggle. But you were not, were you? You genuinely saw beauty in the work itself, in the dedication and love that motivated it. Warren nodded. I saw a woman who refused to compromise her values or take the easy path. I saw someone teaching her daughter that dignity comes from within, from the work you do and the principles you uphold. That is beautiful, Grace. That will always be beautiful. She turned to look at him, this man who had walked into her life and transformed it so completely. His hair was fully gray now, his face deeply lined from years in the sun. But his eyes still held the same warmth and honesty that had convinced her to take a chance on love again. Thank you, she said simply, for everything, for seeing me, for staying, for building this life with me. Thank you for letting me, he replied, pulling her closer, for trusting me with your heart and your daughter, for taking a risk on a cowboy with nothing but good intentions and calloused hands. They sat together until the sun began to set, painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple. Then they rode back to the ranch, to their home, to the life they had built together through love and honest work. The years that followed brought the normal mixture of joy and sorrow that accompanies any long life. Grace's health began to decline in her late 50s, her joints aching and her energy waning. Warren reduced his own workload to care for her, their roles reversing from those early days when he had helped with her laundry. Rose surprised them all by announcing her engagement at 23, having finally met a man who respected her ambitions and supported her business rather than asking her to abandon it. The wedding was beautiful, held in Rose's bakery surrounded by elaborate sugar sculptures and the sweet smell of fresh bread. Thomas grew into a serious young man who decided to become a teacher rather than a full-time rancher, another unconventional choice that Grace fully supported. He taught at the Yarrington School while still helping with ranch work during summers and weekends. William and Margaret had 3 children, all of whom spent much of their time at their grandparents' ranch, learning about cattle and hard work. Lily's children were scattered, some nearby and some who had left Nevada for opportunities elsewhere. In the spring of 1905, as Grace turned 60 and Warren was 53, they faced their greatest challenge yet. Warren was injured while working with an ornery bull, thrown against a fence post with enough force to break several ribs and cause internal bleeding. For days, his life hung in the balance as he fought fever and pain. Grace sat by his bedside constantly, holding his hand and talking to him even when he was unconscious. She told him stories of their years together, reminded him of all the reasons he needed to fight and survive. The children took turns sitting with her, offering support and sharing their own favorite memories of their father. On the fifth day, Warren opened his eyes and squeezed Grace's hand. "Still here," he whispered, his voice rough. "Thank God," Grace sobbed, pressing her face against his hand. "Do not ever scare me like that again. I am not ready to lose you, not ready to leave you," he replied. "Still too much living to do." His recovery was slow, but Warren was stubborn and Grace was relentless in her care. By summer, he was back on his feet, though he moved more carefully and no longer did the most physically demanding ranch work. That autumn, they celebrated their 27th anniversary surrounded by family. There were now 10 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, with more on the way. The ranch had expanded over the years and was now co-managed by William and a trusted foreman, with Thomas helping during school breaks. "You built something remarkable," Sarah Morrison told Grace during the celebration. The midwife was now in her 70s, but still sharp and active. "When I think about that frightened widow washing laundry in her yard and I see all of this, it takes my breath away." "I had help," Grace said, looking at Warren across the yard. He was holding one of the great-grandchildren, talking seriously to the toddler about something that had the little one's complete attention. "I could not have done any of this alone. Maybe not. But you had the courage to accept that help, to trust again after being hurt. That takes its own kind of strength." As the celebration continued, Grace felt a deep sense of peace. Her body ached and she tired easily these days, but her heart was full. She had lived long enough to see her children and grandchildren thriving, to see the ranch prospering, to see the legacy of honest work and strong values being passed down through generations. That night, as she and Warren prepared for bed, Grace looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was old now, undeniably old, with white hair and deeply lined skin, but she did not regret the aging, did not mourn her lost youth. Every line on her face represented a year lived fully, a challenge overcome, a moment of joy experienced. "What are you thinking?" Warren asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am thinking that I am grateful for every year, every struggle, every moment that brought us here," she said, leaning back against him. "I am thinking that if I could go back and speak to that young widow I would tell her to trust the cowboy who asks to share her burden. I would tell her that the best is yet to come." "The best is yet to come," Warren repeated softly. "I like that. Even now, in our later years, we still have more to experience together." They went to bed and held each other in the darkness, as they had done thousands of times before. Grace listened to Warren's heartbeat, steady and strong despite his injury, and felt her own heart match its rhythm. They had become one in the truest sense, their lives so intertwined that she could not imagine existing without him. The years passed more quickly now, as they always do in life's later stages. Grace's health continued its slow decline, though she remained mentally sharp and emotionally present. Warren developed a persistent cough that worried them all, though he insisted it was nothing serious. In 1908, they celebrated their 30th anniversary. The family gathering was smaller this time, as Grace tired too easily for large events. But their children and closest grandchildren surrounded them, sharing memories and expressing love. 30 years, Grace said wonderingly, sitting beside Warren on their porch. "When you proposed, could you have imagined all of this?" "I imagined being happy with you," Warren replied. "But the reality exceeded anything I could have pictured. You gave me a family, Grace, a real home, purpose and meaning, everything." "We gave that to each other," she corrected gently. "It was always a partnership, never one person giving and another receiving. We built this together." Rose, now 33 and running a successful bakery with her husband, brought out an elaborate cake she had created for the occasion. It was decorated with sugar flowers and had 30 candles arranged around the edges. "Do not make us blow out all of those," Warren joked. "We will exhaust ourselves." The family laughed, and Rose lit just 2 candles instead. Grace and Warren blew them out together, their breath mingling as they extinguished the flames. As the sun set that evening and their children began heading home, Grace felt a strange melancholy settling over her. She could not have explained why, but something in the quality of the light and the feeling in the air made her think of endings rather than continuations. That night, she and Warren lay awake talking about their life together, sharing memories and expressing gratitude for all they had experienced. "If I had known how wonderful it would be, I would have said yes to your proposal immediately," Grace said, trailing her fingers over Warren's chest. "I would not have wasted a moment in hesitation." "You needed that time," Warren replied. "You needed to be sure. And honestly, the waiting made our wedding day even sweeter because I knew you had chosen me with full knowledge and intention." "I would choose you again," Grace whispered. "In every lifetime, in every circumstance. I would always choose you." They made love that night, slowly and gently, their bodies knowing each other so completely that words were unnecessary. Afterward, Grace fell asleep in Warren's arms, feeling more content than she could remember. In the morning, Warren did not wake up. Grace realized it slowly, emerging from sleep to find him still beside her, peaceful and quiet. Too quiet. His chest no longer rose and fell with breath, and his skin had lost its warmth. The grief that crashed over her was unlike anything she had experienced before, worse even than losing Thomas because she had loved Warren so much more deeply. She held his body and wept, calling his name even though some part of her knew he was beyond hearing. William found them that way when he came by for his usual morning visit. He sent for Sarah Morrison and the rest of the family, holding his mother while she cried. The funeral was held on a beautiful spring day, with more people attending than Grace could count. Warren had been respected in the community, known for his integrity and fairness. Person after person told Grace how much her husband had meant to them, how he had helped them or treated them with kindness. Grace listened to all of it in a haze of grief. She knew she should feel proud, should take comfort in knowing Warren had lived a good life and died peacefully. But all she felt was a vast emptiness where he had been. The weeks following Warren's death were the darkest of Grace's life. She moved through each day mechanically, eating when reminded, sleeping fitfully, unable to find joy in anything. Her children worried about her, taking turns staying at the ranch to ensure she was not alone. It was Thomas, her youngest, who finally broke through her grief. He sat with her one evening, holding her hand and speaking quietly. "Mama, I know you are in pain, we all are. Papa was everything to this family, but you taught me something when I was young, something I have never forgotten. Do you remember what you said about honest work?" Grace shook her head, unable to recall. "You said that dignity comes from continuing even when it is hard, from choosing to move forward even when you want to stop. You said that the work itself has meaning, not just the results it produces." Thomas squeezed her hand. "Living is work too, Mama. The hardest work of all sometimes. But you still have so much to do, so many people who need you. Please do not give up on that beautiful burden of living." His words, echoing Warren's own from so many years ago, finally reached her. She began to cry, really cry for the first time since the funeral. Thomas held her while she sobbed, letting out the grief she had been holding inside. "He loved you so much," Thomas said quietly, "and he would want you to keep living, keep finding joy. Honor his memory by continuing the life you built together." Slowly, painfully, Grace began to heal. She would never stop missing Warren, never stop feeling his absence like a wound that would not fully close. But she learned to keep going, to find purpose in her children and grandchildren, in maintaining the ranch, in all the things they had built together. She lived for 7 more years after Warren's death, years filled with more grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with watching her children thrive and succeed. Rose's bakery expanded to a second location. Thomas became the principal of the Yarrington School. William's cattle operation grew to be one of the most successful in the region. Lily's grandchildren began having children of their own. In the spring of 1915, as Grace lay in her bed with her children surrounding her, she felt ready to let go. She was 70 years old and had lived a full, rich life. Her body was failing, but her mind remained clear until the end. "I love you all so much," she told her children, her voice weak but steady. "You have given me such joy. Never forget what your father taught you, what we tried to teach you together. The value of honest work, the beauty in choosing the hard path because it is the right one, the importance of partnership and shared burdens. We will remember, Mama," Lily promised, tears streaming down her face. "And we will teach our own children and grandchildren." As Grace's breathing slowed, she thought she saw Warren standing in the corner of the room, looking young and strong as he had when they first met. He was smiling, extending his hand to her. "Ready to share another burden with me?" he seemed to ask. "Always," she whispered, and with her children's hands holding hers, Grace Vance closed her eyes and let herself go home to the man she loved. Her funeral was attended by hundreds, a testament to the life she had lived and the legacy she left. The ranch continued under William's management, passed down through generations just as Grace and Warren had hoped. Rose's bakery became a Yarrington institution that lasted well into the next century. Thomas's students carried forward the values he had learned from his parents, spreading the importance of integrity and hard work to new generations. But perhaps the most important legacy was simpler than any of that. Grace and Warren had shown their children and grandchildren that love could be a partnership of equals, that accepting help was not weakness, and that honest work done with dignity was its own reward. They had proven that second chances were possible, that past pain did not have to define future joy. The story of the widow who taught her daughter honest work, and the cowboy who asked to share that beautiful burden, became a family legend passed down through the years. It reminded each new generation that the best things in life came from courage, integrity, and the willingness to trust, despite past hurts. And on warm spring evenings, when the Nevada sky turned orange and purple at sunset, sometimes the wind seemed to carry whispers across the ranch that still bore the Vance name. Those who listened closely might hear the sound of laughter, of a man and woman talking quietly about the day's work, of children playing and family gathering. The beautiful burden Grace and Warren had shared lived on, transformed into a legacy of love that touched countless lives across the decades. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most rewarding destinations, and that sharing life's struggles with someone you love can transform burden into blessing. Their story was not one of dramatic rescue or fairy tale romance. It was better than that. It was real, built on mutual respect and shared values, on daily choices to work together and support each other. It was a love that grew deeper with time rather than fading, strengthened by challenges rather than broken by them. And in the end, that was the truest kind of love story there was. Not the easy kind that required no effort, but the beautiful, difficult, rewarding kind that was earned through honest work and genuine commitment. The kind of love that built not just a marriage, but a family, a ranch, a legacy that lasted generations. Grace and Warren Vance had shared their beautiful burden, and in doing so, they had created something that would never truly die. Their love lived on in every descendant who chose integrity over convenience, partnership over selfishness, honest work over easy shortcuts. It lived on in the ranch that still stood proud under the Nevada sky, in the values that continued to guide their family. It was a love story worthy of remembering, not for its drama or tragedy, but for its simple, profound truth. That two people committed to sharing life's burdens could create something far more beautiful than either could have built alone.